Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm joined by David Hughes. Dave, feels like we've been away for a while, mate. How are you getting on?
Yeah. A lot of football's been played since we last recorded, hasn't it? So it's probably only been a week or so, hasn't it? But yeah, it feels like a long time. But I'm doing well, mate. Hope you are as well.
Yeah, it has only been 8 days, but in that period, Liverpool have played 3 times. So we do feel a little bit out the picture, a little bit behind times. Liverpool have played Everton, obviously, Wolves, and last night played AC Milan. So today's episode, we're going to briefly look back at those games, not the usual level of scrutiny on those games, but just mainly the talking points and things like that, general feelings, and then obviously a look ahead to Steven Gerrard, who is going to Anfield for the first time as an opponent. So that'll be a good one to preview. But just rolling it back to what feels like a lifetime ago, Dave. I'm sure you probably won't want to do this. Obviously, you're a blue, but what was it like from your perspective? Merseyside derby. You know how Liverpool played. What it was like to face Liverpool, I suppose, from a rival perspective, and yeah, just general feelings around the game.
I'll be honest, there wasn't really any surprises at all. You know, it kind of played out as predicted. Um, Liverpool dominated proceedings for pretty much the entirety of the game. Really commanding. Obviously took a good early lead, 2 goals, conceded a goal. And in fairness, I thought for a short period in the second half, the game felt a lot more competitive. Or I don't know if that's the right term, but certainly it felt like it was not as easy for Liverpool. But I think it's from an Everton corner that the third goal comes. Mistake from Coleman. Puts Salah through in on goal. And obviously so ruthless that you expected him to score. He did. I know people said it was a bit of a miss hit, but I think it didn't matter. It was always going to be a goal. And then really from there, I guess from an Everton point of view, it was damage limitation. 4-1 in another year is a pretty dour defeat. But I think this time, in the circumstances, there was probably a little bit of relief that it was only that. It wasn't, a kind of repeat of Old Trafford 5-0 or something worse, because it could have been. Liverpool were very dangerous on the night. So yeah, on the whole, Josh, I'd say it probably went as expected. Liverpool played really well and were by far the better team.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Liverpool. Actually, I think it's probably the best I've seen Liverpool play at Goodison Park since I've been a fan over the years. I flagged before the game that's generally a tricky ground to go to and things, and despite the form table, it's a place that Klopp's never really prospered too much as a coach. But I thought from the off, Liverpool were just really, really focused, really on it. Played with a high tempo, 1-2 touch football. Must admit, I was quite surprised with what I mean. I thought Everton seemed to adopt a form of high press in certain moments. But it was like I think it was quite like that Rangnick quote, where it's kind of like a little bit of pressing. What is a little bit of pressing? A little bit of pressing is like a little bit of pregnant.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
Green all tweet something like that actually.
yeah,
Yeah, it was really poor. It felt like the front line was pressing, but the defensive line wasn't. So what you had was this ridiculous scenario where you had maybe 4 players in their own defensive third and 3 or 4 in the attacking third. And, it was an absolute gift for Liverpool, just completely play through it. And then you've got about 30, 40 yards of space for the clip in particular I'm thinking of was Henderson, where he receives the ball and there's not a man near him, and Everton's defensive line is somewhere kind of on the edge of their own box almost. It was, as you said, you used a Rangnick quote, was perfect example there. It was really poor. I don't know what the thinking was behind that, because
I really don't.
yeah, if you look at Everton's underlying numbers this season, they've been far from a pressing side. And I wouldn't say Liverpool, the team that you think, let's go and press. Now, maybe it was adjusted to think doing so might get the fans on board and, might kind of put Liverpool under a bit of pressure. But know your opposition.
Yeah, it's just disheartening, isn't it, as well, when you
Yeah.
get progressed beyond so easy. I
Yeah.
thought Liverpool broke through Everton's press so easy at times.
They were just overloading every time. It was so easy because there wasn't enough players there. The gaps weren't
Yeah,
condensed enough.
yeah, it's not a tactic you would associate with Benitez, and I think the way Everton kind of did it, the way they employed it, they executed it. I think that showed. I think it showed that Rafa's not a pressing coach. He doesn't coach that sort of thing. Um,
Josh, on that point, do you think that was a little bit of desperation, kind of on his
um,
part, trying to do something different to change the outcome?
I'm not sure it was desperation, but I think it was. It's the kind of thing I don't think Rafa would have done if results were going well, and if he was. And he's generally very, very good, by the way, at staying grounded and not getting too carried away with results and things. But it's felt like the kind of approach Rafa wouldn't usually take. Um, so maybe he could be influenced slightly by emotion of his current situation at the minute. Felt a little bit under pressure or whatever, but um, yeah, I thought Liverpool were superb on the day, and 16 shots to Everton's 8. And in terms of the expected goals, very impressive. Liverpool posted 2.1 and Everton posted 0.6. So you're looking at about a 2-0 win really there on a normal day, but Liverpool took their chances and scored 4. One player did one, well, two players won a flag actually on the back of the performance. I think first we'll go with Salah. Obviously, I've just mentioned there Liverpool took their chances. Two of those chances were Salah finding the back of the net. And I actually spoke to a Blue Dave on the back of the performance who was at the ground. I won't name him because you know him actually. I
Was it
won't
right?
name him, but he actually said as a Blue in the ground, it was actually an honour to witness Salah live. That was what he said. Um, Obviously the best player in the world at the minute, according to many. I would probably agree with that on current form.
I think you've done him
And
a favour in not mentioning him. He won't be allowed back in.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, um, but yeah, I thought he was bright, mate. I thought he was. I thought he shined.
Yeah, he is every week, isn't he? Irrespective of the opposition, irrespective of the occasion, anything. He's just in elite form. Almost unstoppable form. Which kind of makes the whole. I guess this is why the contract situation is such a big talking point amongst Liverpool fans because you're probably looking at the best player in the world right now. You got him on your books. You don't have to buy him; he's already there. You've just got to give him more money each week. Yeah, we've already covered it, haven't we? That it's a complicated issue because the increase probably has ramifications for the rest of the squad. Kind of creates an imbalance on what's the weekly wage of the club, I guess, across the board. But it's just so hard at the moment to kind of not justify because the form he's in.
Yeah, I mean, judging by Twitter, whenever I've talked briefly about this sort of thing, just general passing comments, really just general conversation, people are absolutely all over you when it comes to this sort of thing. Any sort of suggestion that goes against just paying what he wants, and you will get ripped to shreds. So I think I'm going to avoid it personally, even
I
though I
don't
do
mind
see.
it. Yeah, I don't mind. I'll talk about it. I'll welcome it. The only thing I would say, because I know you're a little bit more level-headed with the discussion, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I suppose you could look at it, and I'm right in saying he's 30 next year, isn't he? In June. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So he is 30 in June. So there is always the possibility that, if you give him another long-term contract on the 400 odd thousand a week, that it does end up becoming a little bit of an issue in 2 years' time. Because, is a lot of the outrage being driven by the form he's in, this elite form, and it's kind of this window where it's probably in his camp anyway, the best time to get that contract extension, asking for that money.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
understand what I'm trying to say?
yeah, I think it's great timing for Salah's camp when it comes to this sort of thing. He is showcasing top form and absolutely no signs of regression. Based on all the games he's played so far this season for Liverpool, every game in all competitions, he's only blanked twice And what I mean by blanked is no goal or no assist. But he's registered at least a goal or an assist in every other game. The only 2 times he's blanked was at home against Burnley and at home against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. They're the only two times he's not registered a goal and assist in a game. So he is absolutely elite at the minute, and he is probably Liverpool's best player at the moment. And I think the wage he's reportedly asking for £400 a week, I think it is, he deserves. He is without doubt in that bracket of play. If you look at what players are earning generally across the board in Europe, he is worth that without doubt. My big concern is I don't think he's going to get that at Liverpool. I just don't think he's going to get it, and that's not because Liverpool are necessarily cheap or whatever. It's because none of his teammates are even close to it. And a lot of those teammates, the top ones, have just signed new deals. So you can't tie them down and then go and give Salah double what they're on. Because it's just the kind of thing that Arsenal and Man United have done over the years, and it just results in uproar, it results in total imbalances. Over the next couple of years, you have to cleanse the squad and bring the wage bill down by trying to shift players who you can't shift because they're on so much money. So it's just generally a difficult scenario. I don't think any Liverpool player is on over 250 grand a week. Salah's obviously asking for 4. Now there's ways around it. I suppose you can incentivize it a lot, and I suppose his base wage could still be 250, for example. But you incentivize it by saying, okay, if you score 20 Premier League goals, you get an extra whatever grand a year type thing. But I suppose it's just how flexible is Campo willing to be, and how open to those incentives he is willing to be. But I understand that he's looking at the situation and saying things like, your financial value shows how much you're valued by the club, and he is worth 400 grand a week in the grand scheme of things. But I just think from a Liverpool perspective, I can't see how he expects the club to pay him that, considering what his teammates are on. Everything I'm saying is based on what his teammates are on, because his teammates are on half that, and his teammates are world class. Van Dijk is the Wales' best centre half. Alisson, in my opinion, top 2 Wales' best keepers. Fabinho, top 2 Wales' best DMs potentially. Thiago, ridiculous. So it's really is a tough one. I didn't plan to speak about the contract today, but it's a real puzzle, I think.
Yeah. It's the takeaway really is, for people listening, that talking as an individual, he is worth that, but you've just got to look at it from a collective Liverpool point of view, and that's where it muddies the water ever so slightly.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully the whole 400 grand rumour is just kind of like the starting point of negotiations from his camp. The way, for example, if you're bidding for a house, you'll bid well below the asking price or whatever and hope to meet somewhere in the middle. Maybe they'll meet somewhere in the middle around 300 and, whatever, I don't know. See where we go with it, but I do hope he stays, obviously. And the final player I want to touch on regarding the derby very quickly is Thiago. I thought Thiago was brilliant throughout. I thought he was very good in the derby last season as well. And I think this season not that we didn't last year, but I think this season we are seeing Thiago with a proper system around him, basically a watertight system around him.
Yeah, he's benefiting from more balance, I think. His derby performance didn't come as a surprise because, as you just touched on, he was really good last time at Goodison. We did talk about him before the show for quite a few minutes, saying he could be a key player. And he was, he's playing really well. People starting to see what he can bring. And it is, I think, though, important that he's got the right players around him and the right system. I don't think he had that at times last season. He did look exposed. People get a little bit defensive when you say he didn't look the best, but he didn't. He had issues at times, but he looks much better now. And I do think the team is a lot. If you look at the team, it's so much better this year. A lot better structure, more consistent players. Fit, key players are fit. All this contributes, I think, to being able to get the best out of these players, and certainly Thiago is one of them. And the evidence is what we're seeing so far this season.
Yeah, I think defensively, particularly over the past couple of games, he's looked really, really spot on. Very good at regaining the ball. His timing and things like that has been spot on. We obviously flagged last season as a number of fouls and things like that. But I'm actually writing a little piece on Thiago now for the newsletter. So it'll be going out later today. So by the time people listen to this podcast, it'll probably be too late to get it if you haven't signed up. But do sign up. So when it comes to Wolves, Dave, was it a lucky win or was it deserved?
So obviously the narrative was it was a lucky win, and as it often is when you score a late goal, last kick of the game stuff. So that's the narrative, and I get it. But let's be honest, on the balance of play, underlying numbers back it up. I'm sure you'll run through them shortly. Liverpool did do enough to win the game. It just so happens that the goal comes via the kind of last chance saloon, but they did do enough to win the game. And I think had that game finished goalless, it would have been a really frustrating draw for Liverpool, where they would have been coming away thinking we've done everything right there. There's not much we did wrong, and we've still not come away with 3 points. So to answer your question, Josh, I thought it was, despite the narrative, deserved.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a huge win to pick up a 1-0 win. Last kick of the game. Another Divock Origi rolling back the years. On the same day, I think that Chelsea obviously lost. That's a huge win. And when it comes to it being lucky and things like that, not for me. Liverpool took 17 shots and restricted Wolves 3. Wolves offered absolutely nothing in attack.
They don't look good at the moment going forward, Wolves, do they?
Well, it's hard because
against Liverpool.
Yeah, it's hard because I haven't watched them that much. I've been most impressed by how they've behaved without the ball, without paying that much attention to what they've been doing with it in attack and things like that. But in this game, I thought they were very, very maybe inferior is the word. I think they had very little belief that they were going to actually pick anything up from this game, and it was kind of just 10 behind the ball at all times. The expected goals highlights that. Liverpool posted an XG of 2.5 and Wolves 0.2. So pretty much Wolves guaranteed there to not score. And Liverpool should be scoring about 2 or 3 there. So very much a deserved win for me. I think the only real threat that Liverpool had to deal with throughout the game was Adama Traore, who we know is just an absolute one-off.
Yeah.
I mean, he is crazy. There has been, actually, funny enough, Dave, slight links with Traore for January for about 20 million, I think is the figure. Just what are your general thoughts on that?
I don't know. It was a strange one. He does seem to get linked a lot because he has performances, where he causes a havoc and people tend to think, oh, we could do really good in a better side. And I think the problem is for me, I feel like I've watched them a lot now, over the past, say, 2 or 3 seasons. And sometimes you watch him and you think this version of him is unplayable, like literally unplayable.
Yeah,
in terms of picking the ball up, the way he can progress his team up the pitch. Players can't stop him; they bounce off him. He can, bypass 2 or 3 challenges. In that form, you think this player is unplayable, but then I've watched him, 2 weeks later, and he's invisible. He's not there. He's making bad decisions. I think of his general attacking returns as well aren't that great. So I'd have question marks. I don't know. Maybe. Do you think Klopp could get the best out of him? Do you?
It's a really tricky one when it comes to Traore because he, like you just said, he is such a weird, unique footballer. And I think it's natural to look at what he offers and think, oh, he'd be great for Liverpool. But you have to remember it's a totally different game when you play for Liverpool. The style of play is so different. You face some blocks as opposed to facing open space more often than not. I do think he is a very useful tactical tool to have. Say, for example, we were facing a team like Manchester City and we were a goal up or something like that. If you've got, say, a front three waiting on the halfway line of Salah, Mane, Traore, you are terrified as a defender. There's no doubt about that. So I understand that general perception, but then he offers zero product. His end product is almost non. His end product shocking.
What's he on at the moment in terms of contributions this year?
He's on none in the
Oh.
Premier League. He hasn't registered a goal. He hasn't registered an assist. Last season, he started 28 Premier League games, featured in 37 of them. 2 goals, 2 assists. Season before, again, 27 starts, 37 appearances in the Premier League. 4 goals, 9 assists. And of those 9 assists, I'm pretty sure they were pretty much all where he runs to the byline, crosses it, Raul Jimenez heads it in.
Yeah.
That on repeat, basically. And when it comes to Liverpool and Liverpool forwards in particular, Liverpool forwards are them those players who are just naturally inclined to score goals even when they play bad, like a Jota, a Salah, Mane, those inverted major threats. Jared Bowen, you could throw in that potentially, even though he's got a bit less output to his game based on his time at West Ham. But I think just Traore, he just doesn't look like one of those. He's just not.
No.
The only reason I think there's a glimmer of potential there is his contract situation. That's it. I don't think he's out of contract this summer. In fact, he might be actually. I have to check that now. But if not this summer, he's definitely out of contract next summer. So as a result of that, obviously you end up losing him for less than his worth. So I do wonder if Liverpool will potentially look at him and think 20 million for that. 25 years old, give him to Jurgen Klopp.
See what he can
His
do.
contract runs out in 2023. So this summer he'll have a year left, and in January he'll have 18 months left. But other than that, I'd be like absolutely no way. But other than that's the only reason I see there's a glimmer of hope there that he could end up at Anfield. But I think Liverpool can get better personally.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I suppose one thing you could say is, although we've just been talking about his chance creation, if you have a look at his like underlying expected assist numbers, not that bad. That season where he got 9, it was 6.7. Last season 5.4. They're not bad numbers, but I think if you just watch him, his decision making is pretty poor. If you go beyond just the numbers and actually watch him play. A lot of poor decisions in there, or not the best final ball delivery and things. It's just, I guess he'd have to fine tune his game a lot to come as this Liverpool side and have a true impact. I think you need more, or at least an impact enough to justify the figures that we've just been talking about. 40 million. If you look at what the impact Jota had with that, would he be able to replicate it? And if not, would it be worth Liverpool investing that money? Probably not.
Well, that's why I think it's not one that I'm willing to absolutely rule out, even though I do not think he's much of a Liverpool player. The reason I'm not ruling it out totally is because if his deal runs out in 18 months, Liverpool could potentially get him for about 20. And if that's the case, it's a bit more of one of those that you probably think about, if you know what I mean. And it depends what else is out there, how much Leeds are quoting for Rafinha, and how much, just all those players, all those inside forwards Liverpool are likely to be linked with. If you can get Traore for 20, he's probably worth more than 20 in fairness to him. So I don't know. I still can't see. I'd be shocked if that materialises, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll move on from Wolves then, and we'll have a quick note towards last night. We don't usually touch on Champions League opponents
Dead
beyond.
rubbers anyway.
Yeah, we don't, dead rubbers at least. Yeah, but if we do, we usually touch on them for the first game, and then when the second game comes around, which this was, Liverpool obviously played Milan twice now. We don't usually touch on it, but given that Liverpool have qualified, 6 wins out of 6, which is extremely impressive. I'm just want to talk about the general Champions League overall, and basically whether Liverpool can win it.
Yeah, I think they can. And that's not on the basis of winning these 6 games, which I agree is impressive. But in fact, I think we touched on this briefly recently, but The main sides that you're concerned about is obviously City, Chelsea to an extent, Bayern Munich, and beyond that, I think there's big caveats to the teams. It kind of reminds me when we were talking about this group. You know, it was being labelled as a group of death, but I was fairly content that Liverpool would beat most of the teams. Yeah, I think they obviously beat Porto. I expect them to beat Milan. Atletico was a tricky one, but obviously you wouldn't be shocked if Liverpool would win those games, and they did. And I guess to stretch that to a wider point, I look at the remaining teams in it, the remaining threats for Liverpool, and I think City, yeah, but Liverpool have a good record against City. Chelsea, you'd still back Liverpool there, and then Bayern Munich are just always tough. But if you think of I mean, who else, Josh? Can you think of anyone else there that you think is someone not to be scared of?
I would always
I'm
want
have to
to.
bring the teams up.
I would always want to avoid Atletico Madrid in the knockouts. Not because Liverpool aren't as good as them, and Liverpool have just beat them twice, I think, in the groups. But he did get a man sent off in both games. But they're just a team I would just always want to avoid in knockout games, just because over the course of knockout games like that, 90-minute spells, they can just find ways to win. So I would like to avoid them. Obviously, Liverpool can't get them in the next round anyway. But no, I agree with you, really. But I think in the next round, Liverpool could actually get quite a tricky side, despite finishing top of the group. So as it stands right now, Liverpool can get PSG, Sporting Lisbon, Inter Milan, and the rest of the group games will take place tonight. But as it stands, it will be, in addition to those teams I've just named, Barcelona, Villarreal, RB Salzburg, and Juventus. So that's not the easiest. That doesn't look like the easiest group of teams for the. I think this is around the 16.
Yeah.
So Liverpool generally get a relatively easy draw. Liverpool usually get Porto.
Yeah. It's got that one out the way early doors this year.
Yeah, that obviously can't happen this year, but I think it's going to be interesting moving forward. But I do think overall, I know it's a lot of people are saying it, but I do think it's true. I do think it's out of 4 teams this year. And then slightly outside of those 4 teams, I would probably put maybe PSG and Real Madrid on the same level, potentially, and below them even further. You've got like Juventus as outsiders, Barcelona as outsiders. I also would like to throw in there, though, potential dark horses, Ajax. I'm very intrigued to see how Ajax get on, because they're the only other team, in addition to Liverpool, that won all 6 of their games, scored 20, conceded 5,
Yeah.
and they're flying domestically as well. They went on a run a few years back, obviously, but I'm looking forward to seeing Ajax and how they get on for the rest of the competition.
Yeah, I can't see them winning it, but they have been really impressive. It looks like they've done it again in terms of bringing through another quality side that can kind of outperform on the continent. I'm just having a look at their group now, actually, and
Ajax.
Dortmund went out, didn't he? They're doing the same.
Sporting finished second. Yeah,
that's a stinker for them because Dortmund haven't been too bad domestically this year. We haven't been that far behind Bayern. I know they lost on the weekend to them, but not great for them now, is it? That's pretty poor, but Ajax really impressive. And I don't know how good Sporting are this year. I haven't seen any of them. I haven't watched any of them, so I don't know if they'd be a problem. You flagged them earlier, but I suspect they'd just be a Porto equivalent.
Yeah, I'm just looking at their team now, to be honest, and I barely recognise anybody. So I can't envisage them being any sort of issue, despite how good they're playing. In terms of Liverpool, I can't see them being an issue. And then when it comes to Ajax, obviously Liverpool can't face them in the next round anyway, because Ajax finished comfortably top as well. But it's going to be interesting to see where Liverpool go. I mean, the prospect of facing PSG in the next round is pretty real, and I think that would be very interesting, really, because two very different teams when it comes to
Yeah.
just how to work as a team. Very, very different. And I do think in a game like that, I would like to think at least that the team of 11 players, rather than the team of 7 players, is more likely to win. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
What
PSG.
I remember the meeting last year. Sorry, 2 years ago was it? Where Liverpool met PSG. I think they were in the same group together.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
that was when
so-
Tuchel was in charge.
yeah. I certainly remember the Anfield game. This kind of finished 3-2 that night, and I remember them thinking, you can see there's basically two teams in this one team here. There's an attacking side and a defending side, and Neymar and I'm trying to remember if they definitely played, but they had Neymar. Did Mbappe play? I can't
Yeah,
remember. But
Mbappe scored 2, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. So you had that, and then I can't remember who else was in there. It might have been Cavani, Di Maria, someone like that. But they still had this split that we're seeing now. And obviously that's just enhanced more with Messi in there, because obviously Messi's not expected to do those defensive actions either. So that's kind of been this ongoing problem at PSG before Messi. A lot of people talking about it now with Messi coming in, that they kind of they have this imbalance. But I think it's been a problem since Neymar's been there. Neymar, then Mbappe, and now they've just got a third player who's kind of relieved of all these defensive duties as well. And for that reason, I think Liverpool would come out on top over 2 games.
Yeah, I don't think it's any surprise, given that you've just said that Tuchel was really, really obsessed with trying to get Kante to PSG while he was there. He's obviously excited to work with him at Chelsea, and he ended up getting into Sergei as an alternative, who's another who's very, very good at covering ground and working for the team and things like that, and basically carrying attacking players who don't offer much on the defensive side of the game. Whereas I don't think, yeah, it's a difficult one, but I think when it comes to PSG, one surprising thing about the group stage is, although we're kind of writing them off a little bit, if you look at their 2 group stage games against Manchester City, if those were knockout games, PSG would go through. They won the first game 2-0, and they lost the second game 2-1. So that would actually result in, obviously, City getting knocked out. I mean, it's hard to say that anyway, because it remains to be seen how they would have behaved in a knockout game and how City would have reacted to knowing that information and things. But I suppose given that City are considered as amongst the favourites, I suppose you can't really rule them out. I mean, any team that's got a front three of Neymar, Messi and Mbappe, you can never really rule out, really, can you? But I do think that in big games like that, with Anfield as well playing a bit of a factor, I would like to think that Liverpool's, or one for all and, all for 11 type thing would be too much for them. But
Yeah.
just looking at those teams I've just listed, Dave, as potential opponents for Liverpool in the next round, who would you not want to get most?
I can't even remember what they were now. Can you run through them
So,
again?
yeah, as it stands, as I said, some of these group stage games still have to be decided, but as it stands, you have Juventus, Salzburg, Villarreal, Barcelona, Inter Milan, Sporting, PSG.
Who would you not want to get?
I think I would not want to get PSG, I'll be honest.
Well, I think for the reason that we've just said, you wouldn't be, ideally with a team like PSG, because they're still a really good side, but I think once you got down to what would be considered, the best side, so maybe last 8 onwards, and then you met PSG, I think you'd be satisfied.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd be that satisfied meeting them at the last 16. But beyond that, Josh, Juventus struggling again, aren't they? Somewhere in around top 6 in Serie A. Inter Milan, I can't remember how Inter Milan, and I know AC Milan. Let's have a look now, just so people know what's going on in Serie A.
Juventus are 5th on 27 points, same number of points as Fiorentina, and they are 7 points off 4th. Atalanta are in 4th, so that's a fair gap.
Yeah, Inter the second, but they've only lost 1 all season, point behind AC. But you'd be, I know it's different teams, it's not this straightforward, but you'd be thinking if Liverpool just beat AC home and away,
comfortably,
particularly, and with is it fair to say Tuesday night was a second string?
Oh yeah, without doubt. I mean, you
There
had
you go.
Salah and Mane in there and Allison, but other than that,
Yeah,
everybody else
there you
was
go.
rotated.
Yeah, so there you go. So you think, well, yeah, surely you're backing yourself to beat Inter then if AC Milan are a better side than them at present, or at least on par. So I'll be honest, Josh, there's some big names in there, some well-known names, but no one I think will, that they could cause Liverpool big issues.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously the draw is, I think it's Monday, so when we record next week, we should know who Liverpool have got, and we will talk about it then. So hopefully Liverpool get a favourable draw, but regardless, whoever gets Liverpool will probably be more disappointed than whoever Liverpool get. You know, that sort of thing. Um, but we'll look ahead anyway to Aston Villa this Saturday. Uh, Steven Gerrard has started well, mate. 4 games in charge, and he's won 3 of them. And the only game that he's lost has been against Pep Guardiola.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good start. Big impact, and even that one that they lost against City. It was quite a performance-wise anyway. Although obviously City dominated possession, etc., like you'd expect, like they always do. Certainly in terms of chances created, it was quite an even game on the day. Similar numbers in terms of XG and things. So didn't disgrace themselves at all. Sure, learned a lot about the game as well. And yeah, you look at it, Josh, and beyond the emotional aspect of it, with Gerrard coming back to Anfield, even if he wasn't, this Liverpool hero, and you've just taken them for face value as what Aston Villa are now under a new manager, you'd be looking at this one thinking it's not going to be an easy game.
Yeah, I agree. Just looking at their numbers now, so they obviously face Brighton, Palace, City, and Leicester. And the numbers across the games, all of the games are very, very tight. Villa, apart from the game against Leicester, didn't really post an XG in any of the games, really, that suggested, okay, they should win. Against Brighton, it looks a bit like a flip of a coin. Against Palace, it looks a bit like a flip of a coin. Even against City, it looks like a flip of a coin, really, in terms of expected goals. And against Leicester, they posted 2 and Leicester posted 1.2. So I suppose a little bit better in that department. But I think generally looking at what he's done so far, I think he's obviously addressed the defensive side of the game more than made Villa a bit more difficult to beat. And as a result of being better on the defensive side of the game, you just, I suppose, got a bit more of an opportunity to sneak a win type thing. And I think some of the goals Villa have scored, you probably wouldn't see them score again. And I don't think too many of them have happened on the back of Gerrard's coaching in a way. But the defensive game is, I would say, a product of Gerrard's coaching, and I think he's installed very obvious tactics that make it difficult. Specifically, one of the early ones, I watched his first game in charge against Brighton, and it was very, very obvious that the 4-3-3 he was using, which involves his 2 Salah and Mane roles even narrower than Salah and Mane play. The whole team was just basically blocking the centre of the pitch, and it was basically a setup that essentially said to Brighton, if you want to move up the field, you're going to use the flanks, and it forced them out wide a lot. And just by doing that's that tactic Liverpool have used over the years against Manchester City, forcing them out wide if they want to build. And I think it'd be interesting if Liverpool have to face that this weekend, because obviously we have Trent Alexander-Arnold as a solution there. Salah plays out wide, Robertson can progress the play. So, but just generally, I think Villa have profited from how Gerrard's essentially blocked the centre and forced opponents to build out wide.
Yeah, and it needed to be done, didn't it? Because they was shipping goals for fun.
Yeah,
He needed to make them more compact, and that's the best way of doing it. I agree. I think this week is going to be a little bit more challenging because obviously you're showing the opposition, Liverpool in this case, out wide, and that's quite often where the danger men are. But then Liverpool is multifaceted, aren't they, in terms of the threat? If you try to maybe show them inside and look to force mistakes through the middle, turnovers through the middle, you're looking at players like Thiago to try and dispossess, which isn't ideal really. So I guess that's a headache for him to deal with. I'm not sure how he approaches it. I get you probably do maintain still trying to keep Liverpool out wide because obviously the wide areas are the furthest away from goal, but you just got to defend really well when those balls come into the box or come through those areas. Whether you're going to see like if it's I don't know Jota coming in dropping short or those rotations that we've become accustomed to out wide. The Villa players are going to have to be really switched on for that, and it definitely won't be an easy task.
Yeah, just looking a little bit deeper into the numbers that Gerrard's team have posted on the defensive side of the game. So, as a consequence of forcing Brighton out wide in the first game that Gerrard took charge, Brighton posted more crosses than in any of their Premier League games this season, and Villa faced more crosses than in any of their Premier League games all season. So, again, obviously a product of Gerrard's defensive game. And in terms of Manchester City, although they did win 2-1, and obviously Bernardo Silva scored a very, very good goal, City posted an XG of 0.9 attack. Now, all season, that's the lowest XG City have posted in any game. Against Liverpool, they posted 1.2. Against Chelsea, they posted 1.7. 1.6 against PSG. 2 against Manchester United. So Villa kept them to 0.9. So I think in this game against Villa on the weekend, the emphasis for Liverpool has to be on scoring essentially because I don't think Liverpool will suffer too much in defence, but I think breaking Villa down could be a challenge. It could be similar to Wolves, but even trickier. I think. I do think Gerrard will try to offer something on a break, and I think Ollie Watkins is probably the player Liverpool have to take care of. Buendia has also picked up in a little bit of form, but specifically in defence, Liverpool's attack is going to have to be, really fluid and really free flowing to disrupt Villa's really compact central shape, which Gerrard seems to be focusing on.
Yeah, I mean they do have a lot of threat in on the break, don't they? You've touched on a couple of names there. You think of Bailey as well. I think he did play against City, if I remember correctly. There is a lot of threat on the counter, and we can probably expect that it is going to be a case of them sitting in. I mean, although we've seen 4 or 5 games that we can use as a sample now, the best kind of idea we can get of what's going to happen in this game is looking at that fixture that they had against City, because obviously City and Liverpool are quite similar in terms of dominance, and they had 36% possession. Happy to sit in and then just try and break on the counter, and especially with it being at Anfield, I expect the same. So the good thing is hold on, just quickly, just from their point of view, I was going to say they've got good profiles who can counter.
Yeah, I was just going to say the one thing about sitting in that Gerrard seems to have struck a nice balance with. I think a lot of coaches, when they sit in like that, they almost forget to attack, and they kind of adopt the counter-attacking approach without the counter-attacking. And it's just kind of a bit like Wolves. That's exactly what Wolves did. I think Gerrard, whenever he spoke and when I've watched his teams, Rangers and things like that, he gets a nice balance there where it comes to, keeping compact, restricting shots, sitting in a compact block, but also making sure you offer a threat as well. And I think if I had to compare them to a team, they reminded me a little bit of, if you remember Nuno's Wolves when they first got promoted. I think they picked up a few scalps. I think they beat Manchester City. A few top teams struggled against Wolves early on under Nuno. Obviously, Gerrard plays a different system and things like that, but I think in general, the approach when you are facing a stronger team, his team does sit in a block, but they do counter you. They do offer a threat, and I think that's generally a positive that I've found when I've watched Gerrard's teams. I think it's a crucial balance, I think, to strike, especially if you want a top job in the near future. You have to offer some form of threat. And whenever he's spoken in the past about the coaching influences he's had on his career, referencing Benitez and things, I remember him saying about Benitez, he's trying to keep the elements of Benitez, but offer a bit more in attack, basically.
Yeah, he could do with doing that now, Benitez. um, yeah, no. I mean, in terms of the players that we just touched on, the ones who we're talking about the potential threats. Even then, they do offer that. Is there anyone of them? So your Watkins, your Baileys, maybe throw in your McGinns. Is there anyone there that you actually think could cause Liverpool problems?
Well, thankfully Bailey's injured for this game, so
Oh, is he? Oh, okay.
he won't be playing. I think the last game, I think he played a front three of Watkins, Jacob Ramsey, who's a centre mid, and Buendia. Matty Cash has been very involved in their attacks, just arriving late into the box, a bit like Chilwell does for Chelsea. But whether he'll be that advanced when he's up against Sadio Mane, I'm not sure. Obviously, McGinn's a bit of an all-action player, but I think my two biggest threats are A, Ollie Watkins, and B, set pieces. I think they've scored a fair few from set pieces this season. In fact, yet they have. Liverpool are top in the Premier League so far with 8 goals from set pieces, and Villa second on 7. And obviously they've had 21 fewer shots than Liverpool from set pieces. They obviously take fewer corners because they see less of the ball up in that end of the field. And I think they've got a lad who does it for them. I think it's Austin McPhee is the coach.
Yeah, they retained him, didn't he? Even though Smith obviously moved on.
Yeah,
which is always interesting.
Yeah, they've done a few interesting things from set pieces. I think they scored one against Leicester. Leicester have obviously shipping plenty from them. Ezri Konsa, I think it was. In fact, he might have scored both of their goals against Leicester. So those two departments Liverpool have to cater for, and I think if they do, it will be all about can you break down Gerrard's block, and if Liverpool can, I think if any team can in the Premier League, it's probably Liverpool, isn't it?
Definitely.
But I think just rolling it back to what I mentioned before about him offering a threat while retaining defensive balance and how that might relate to a job in the future. We obviously have to talk about Klopp 2024. How much of a possibility is it? Because I remember a few years back I spoke to you about this, and you did say he needed a stepping stone in between. I suppose this now, in a way, could be interpreted as that.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the ideal one, really, because he's come into the Premier League. He's went in with a big club. Okay, Villa aren't as big as Liverpool, but they are definitely a big name, aren't they? A big club, and they kind of fell on hard times a little bit, struggling under Smith. If he was to go in there now and turn them from kind of lower mid-table to consistent kind of top 8 side and maybe deliver some sort of domestic success as well, a trophy or something, then that would be an absolute perfect audition. Obviously, it'd be interesting to see how his football develops at Villa, once he kind of gets his feet under the table properly, whether we see more of what we saw at Rangers, which was this more dominating sides, or whether that was as a consequence of being at Rangers and just being so much better than the rest of the league.
Did say, this is a direct quote, he did say, we will become a possession-based team. They were his exact words. So it's going to be interesting to see if he manages that transition, because it's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's hard to implement in the Premier League, isn't it? Because you could dominate, a Norwich, a Burnley, Newcastle, someone like that. But then you might have Liverpool, City, Chelsea back to back, and you're not going to be dominating there, are you? So it's really hard to kind of implement a philosophy. I guess what the best example you probably look at in terms of trying to do that when not being a very top side is probably Potter at Brighton, isn't it?
Yeah, he's probably the best example, actually. No, they were playing totally different brand of football under Chris Hughton, and a few teams have tried to make that transition in recent years and just got relegated. I think Stoke tried it a while back. Palace tried it with Frank de Boer and absolutely
tanked.
Yeah, no goals, I think, in 8 games or something, and he got sacked and he went to Robertson. So Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he develops. But I do like to think that on this show we flagged him quite a while ago now as a real prospect managerial as a coach, like. And I think he's going down that route still. He's still on an upwards trajectory, and I think in a way, gradually the potential replacements for Klopp, if he does leave in 2024, they're dropping a little bit. I think because one player we've mentioned, one coach we've mentioned on the show a few times is Jesse Marsh, and he's just been sacked. He obviously got the job at RB Leipzig over the summer. Did well at Salzburg, went to Leipzig, and by all accounts, kind of tried to reverse their possession development under Nagelsmann back towards a fast counter-attacking early Liverpool type style. And apparently it didn't really work. And as I said, he's been sacked, but he was on a trajectory that I thought to myself, potentially Liverpool in 3 years, but it doesn't look the case anymore. So as a result of that, and just if you look at the landscape and things like that, Pochettino might end up at United, Ten Hag might end up at United or Bayern by the time 2024 comes around. I'm not sure what the landscape will look like in 2024. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Another thing as well that we never seem to touch on when we talk about him is we've obviously talked about Pep Lijnders, haven't we? As maybe, someone who could kind of step up. But I completely missed when he left Liverpool to go managing in the Netherlands and then got sacked, didn't he? And I think there was other things in there, but there was other factors to that. But I don't know, that muddies the water ever so slightly for me, showing that step up isn't that easy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with Lijnders, I'm a bit torn because I look at him and I think he is a coach through and through.
Yeah. An elite one at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is Klopp isn't so much a coach anymore. Klopp's kind of like that figure, that Ferguson type figure. Ferguson never used to take the training sessions at United. People would do it for him. And Klopp allows Lijnders a lot of freedom to take all the sessions and that. And Klopp just kind of like is that governing figure above everyone who makes the decisions and is the face and things like that. If Lijnders was to replace Klopp, he would dedicate less time to what he loves, which is coaching, I assume anyway. I mean, you can obviously still get a cross between the two. Guardiola, I suppose, is a bit of a cross between the two. Arteta is a bit of a cross between the two. So it is doable, don't get me wrong. And I will be honest, I think gradually with time, I am thinking more and more they're going to just give it to Lijnders. They're going to just give it to Lijnders. It's gradually becoming my opinion, really, simply because of how Liverpool have tackled this sort of thing in the past. FSG in particular, they do like the internal, contingency plan type thing. If you look at what's happening with Edwards getting replaced by Julian Ward, the next in line type thing. I wouldn't be that surprised if FSG before anything else said to Lijnders, do you want to keep this identity going? And then obviously it'll be on Lijnders, which will be a risk. But I do think it's, after being at Liverpool for over a decade, I think it'll be at a time. Because Liverpool have really, honed in on this intensity as our identity type thing. But if you go and get a coach who's even slightly different and he wants to adopt different formations and stuff like that, it does massively impact the direction that you change. And I think if you keep Lijnders, it does keep you on the same path that you've been really refining for years.
I think the thing that we said about what the environment will be like at that period, I think it would be interesting to see what the decision would be made if it felt like Gerrard was in a position where he could come on board, but the club were maybe leaning towards Lijnders, because I feel like Gerrard would be the obvious popular choice, and whether then that would kind of have Lijnders swimming against the tide a little bit, if he did get step up. I mean, we're guessing, aren't we? It's a few years away yet, but.
Well, one of the reasons I think Gerrard has a shot at it is Gerrard is more in that Klopp mould of being letting others do the coaching, and he's kind of the figure, the leader, who just kind of oversees it. And I think if Everton at Liverpool was to remain the same, but Gerrard was to replace Klopp, I don't think the change would be that drastic because he would like to do similar things to Klopp. Linders would be allowed to do exactly what he's been doing, all that. So it's one for the future anyway. But just rolling it back to the Villa game, verdict. What are we saying?
Yeah, I still expect a win, but I do expect this one to be a little bit tougher. I'm going to go 2-1.
I think Liverpool will keep a clean sheet, but I don't think the floodgates will open unless Liverpool's finishing gets, red hot. So I think Liverpool will score 1 or 2. So I think 1 or 2-0 in this one. The fact it's at Anfield is pushing me towards 2-0. But it will be interesting to see how Liverpool break down Gerrard's defensive game because it seems to be very, very good. It seems to be very disciplined, very tight, narrow, compact, all the good stuff basically. So that's one to look out for when the two teams take to the field. But Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you, mate. Cheers, everyone.
And we'll be back next week to review Liverpool's game with Villa, to review the Champions League draw, and to look ahead to, I think it is Newcastle. So do join us then, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.